Good morning, everybody. So, Dallas, where the hell do you start? Um, so, I'm just going to keep using this platform here, Facebook Live, just to talk about this stuff because I just don't have a ton of people locally here to talk about it with, outside of other people at protests and other events. Um, I'm pretty isolated, only black man in two buildings here at the workplace, so I'm just going to use Facebook Live. Where do you start on this Dallas situation? I'm sure some people will hop on the feed, and so I'll be curious for feedback when people do start joining. But this hurts. This really hurts. Like let's put aside Black Lives Matter. Let's put aside police officers. Let's just talk about um, a clear terrorist action in America and how this is going to impact people over the next several days. We've literally seen a week of death in America in very, very gruesome fashion. We started with the death in Louisiana, where you see gunshots fired from multiple angles. Then you move to the death in Minnesota, which in gruesome detail, you see the aftermath of someone actually being shot by police. And then you immediately transition into the death of these several police officers in Dallas, Texas. So troubling because of the connection and the proximity to where President Kennedy was assassinated. This is truly terrible. So they're saying now 5 Dallas police officers have been killed, the deadliest day for police since September the 11th, 2001. That is what we're dealing with here on Friday, July the 8th. The deadliest attack on police since 9/11. So then let's just start to unpack this. And I again welcome anybody's comments on what I have to say here. I said last night, as soon as this story broke, and I was watching it live, I said last night, as soon as this broke, that this was going to be a terrible, terrible thing, because immediately, and I was right, unfortunately, immediately it was going to start this blame game between the people who deny that there's a police violence problem in America and Black Lives Matter and people who are sympathetic to Black Lives Matter. And immediately you started to see it on Twitter, and it started to creep its way on television. It started to creep its way on television immediately in the aftermath of this, that this was the Black Lives Matters protesters who had turned their guns onto the police of Dallas. A despicable notion, a horrible rush to judgment and conclusion that somehow Black Lives Matter activists and peaceful protesters who had concluded a very peaceful march where people were taking selfies with police officers, where the police department was live tweeting the event and taking pictures with the protesters to suggest that turned into some sort of Black Lives Matter orchestrated massacre. It is irresponsible given the timing of the information that we had. And so you saw that start to creep into television coverage. Immediately on CNN, they started to float this notion that it was the protesters who were responsible for shooting these police without any indications of fact in that regard. Immediately, that changed the narrative on Fox News. And on Fox News, they started talking about how protesters did not need to respond this way. I've got CNN on here in the background, and so I see here that the police identified the Dallas ambush gunman as a 25-year-old recluse, Micah Xavier Johnson, a man with no criminal record. So those details are very, very important. It's a young guy, reclusive, so odd behavior, and they're saying he has no criminal record. And so predictably, folks are going to say that gun control is not a good response to this because he wouldn't have been prevented from getting a gun in the first place. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything, but I digress. So we immediately have the irresponsible corporate media saying that Black Lives Matter might be responsible. And then what would be the second biggest tragedy of the night is that you had a black man who was exercising his right to carry a weapon in an open carry state like Texas. And I know it's shocking for some of you who aren't in states where you can actually carry firearms openly, but there are states where you can actually walk around with guns on your person. And so it was a shocking photo, but then they put this photo of this black man on television carrying a rifle, smiling, as if the terrorist who executed 5 police officers, we've learned now, would be walking around smiling in the peaceful protest with a weapon and then turning on the police and then turn himself in. with no fight and no combativeness. And so that smelled terrible. As soon as they started floating it, they rushed to tweet out the photo. It got picked up on every national media outlet that was covering it. MSNBC, CNN, Fox, the local outlets. It was on CNN.com. It was all over Twitter. And so this man's life has been irreparably damaged. Irreparably damaged in the sense that his name is out there. Everyone is now resharing and retweeting the articles featuring the erroneous suspect picture that was put out into the media. And so now this man is never going to be made whole. This man is never going to be made whole. He is completely and utterly ruined for the foreseeable future, probably emotionally. Now, perhaps we can say that the people of Texas are progressive enough to not ostracize him or treat him any differently. Let's hope. But this man's name is now going to be linked in history to this situation. And he's within minutes, they had already put out that this man was not really a suspect. And so my question is, yes, there's the fog of war. Yes, there is a constant stream of information, much of it incorrect, that comes out early in situations like this. But this man whose picture was placed on global television coverage in global social media, only to have minutes later someone say, these police say, well, this guy's actually not a suspect. He's a person of interest. And then it turns out that there's video of this man fleeing the bullets just like everybody else. So, I mean, obviously the police being murdered, savagely attacked, is a tragedy in itself. It's a horrible, horrible thing. But I would say that right up there is this man's photo, unfortunately, being placed into global news coverage, only to minutes later clearly and definitively be proven not to be the shooter. So my thoughts go out to that man and what he's going to have to deal with. That man could have been killed last night in an open carry state, being labeled essentially a domestic terrorist. That man could have been shot on sight by infinite number of people in Dallas, Texas last night, including the police officers after his photo was erroneously circulated. Let's just pause on that. That man could have been shot. Whether they said 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes later that he was not really a suspect and the picture was erroneous, that man could have been shot dead in the streets of Dallas for having his picture circulated in that manner. That was wrong. So then let's talk about the police heroism. So you pivot off of the injustice of that man having his photo erroneously circulated as a suspect. Thank God that his family and friends were out there and that has been cleared up. Then you move to the police heroism. You saw these police officers running towards the bullets, not knowing where they were coming from, what building, what elevation, how many shooters. These officers proved what we all know, is that there's plenty of brave and wonderful people out there who are protecting us and serving us and defending us every day from monsters like, this guy who was shooting people with this long gun. And the police were running towards these bullets. If you listen to the police radio coverage, you hear them saying, he's in the building, he's in that building. They knew where he was, and they're running towards it, trying to see if they could take this guy out to preserve life, to protect themselves. You saw the immense training, and I was so proud to see that the head of this police department was a well-spoken, articulate black man who knew what the hell he was doing. And it was clear at the press conference he knew what the hell he was doing, and he had the situation under control. And these people were trained so well. You saw them using great police strategies, like putting the engine block of cars between themselves and the shooter so that the bullets couldn't pass through the car and kill the officers. You saw how well-trained these officers were to respond to a situation like this without it turning into more chaos than it already was. So I just want to say kudos to those police officers in Dallas, the heroism that they showed, the brilliant training that they showed, the calm and diplomacy and expertise that black head of that police department showed on national television in the middle of what is clearly the worst crisis of his career. He showed that black people We don't melt under pressure. We turn into diamonds. That man deserves all the commendations as the head of that police department that he could possibly get for how he handled that situation, as well as relaying that information clearly and calmly in the press conference right before he had to decide how they were going to go in and get this man. So he immediately left that press conference and had to decide what they were going to do in this standoff with this guy. So I don't have his name right in front of me, but kudos to the police chief in Dallas representing black people and black men positively and showing that we can set up a police department for success and not chaos. So kudos to him. The last thing I want to touch on is terrorism. So I guess this guy is that they killed last night. I believe it was a robotic bomb that they wound up taking this guy out with last night. So he's allegedly said that he's not connected to any organizations. He wanted to kill white people. They keep saying, using his quote, he was upset about Black Lives Matter. I'm not sure what that means, whether he's upset with Black Lives Matter or whether he is upset in affiliating himself with Black Lives Matter. But regardless of what happened, this guy was a terrorist, whether he was with ISIS or Al-Qaeda or any of these other radicalized groups in America, or whether he was just a domestic terrorist who was planning this all along, or got radicalized by these police shootings. But this is terrorism. This is not what was floated on television last night. For those of you who came into the feed late and may have missed it, what was floated on television last night and is still being floated right now is that Black Lives Matter might have had something to do with the planning of this assassination of police officers in Dallas, which is bullshit, we all know. And this is a terrorist. This guy was clearly trained on how to use this weapon. This guy clearly had placed some sort of premeditation into what he was going to do to take out these police officers. And this is nothing more than terrorism that has taken advantage of the Black Lives Matter peaceful protest in Dallas to actually inflict harm on police officers. And so I don't want anyone to be confused. I've even seen people on my Facebook feed kind of resharing and going along with this notion that we shouldn't be, the solution is not to attack the police officers. We shouldn't lash out in this way. Well, it's not we. I don't believe that this guy believed in the cause that we all were hoping would get some attention this weekend and the weeks ahead about police violence. I don't think that this guy had any real legitimate participation in the demonstrations in Dallas. I think that this was a guy who took advantage, who savagely and maliciously took advantage of a peaceful assembly of protesters, of officers, again, officers who were taking selfies with the protesters, who were live tweeting the protest march. These officers who were doing what they were supposed to be doing, who were being friends to the community, a police department that, from what I understand, has a solid reputation of community policing. These officers did nothing wrong, and this guy took advantage. I don't believe that he walked away from the protest and decided to take aim at these people. I don't believe that he was one of those people who, like us, was posting his sorrow and grief on social media about these things and was lashing out as a form of protest. I think that this was an act of terrorism that has taken advantage of a really, really horrible situation. So there's a lot of people watching this, way more than watched my previous 2 videos this week. I'm horrified that I'm even doing another video, but again, I just want to get this off my chest and use the platform that I have. I'll leave everybody with this. Do not fall for this trap of civil war. I think the New York Post, it was the paper that led with the headline Civil War. Fuck that. We're not interested in another civil war. We're interested in progress. We're interested in peace. We're interested in a resolution to this. I have no interest in seeing black people or anybody shooting with police. If you think that shooting police is the answer, unfriend me, please. If you think that it's acceptable for something like this to happen, we don't need to be affiliated. What we need is solutions and intelligent people and emotionally rational people to get involved, to have conversations, to propose policies, to pressure Congress, to pressure President Obama, to pressure Hillary Clinton, to pressure Donald Trump or whoever is out there, to pressure Speaker Paul Ryan, that we need to get the gun control problem and the violence and policing problem and the discrimination and racial problems in America under control. If you think that violence is the answer, you have no business in the conversation. And so I want to challenge everybody here to, number one, push back against this notion that Black Lives Matter has something to do with this, because they didn't. Push back against this idea that all police are bad, because the police in Dallas prove that they are heroes, that they're some of the bravest people we have ever seen in life, running towards sniper fire. In real time, they're training to actually position themselves properly in that combat zone, in that kill zone. The training, I want everybody to lift up this police captain, this police chief in Dallas, this black man who had such grace and expertise and cool under pressure last night in front of a global television audience, and then made the successful call to take this son of a bitch out with I believe it was a robotic bomb. We need to push that story. We need to defend and push back on anybody who continues to circulate that erroneous suspect picture of that black man carrying the rifle. And we need to continue to use this platform to talk about the issue that should be talked about today before this horrible incident last night, which is continuing to improve the relationship between black communities and the police. So that's what I would challenge everybody to do. But number one is let's go out right now and defeat this idea that the peaceful protesters had anything to do with this. If you see anybody even pretending to go along with that, or even making this commentary that this is not going to solve our problems, if you say this is not going to solve our problems, then you're kind of inherently agreeing with that this was some sort of affiliation with the protest. Distance yourself from that. This had nothing to do with those peaceful protests. Black Lives Matter and people who are genuinely upset and emotional about this had nothing to do with this shooting. And so if you see people going along with that, either through misinformation, maybe they just don't know, maybe they haven't looked into it and just assumed, or maybe they're maliciously saying, see, black people and Black Lives. Okay, so my feed cut out. So I'm just going to say people could be genuinely confused. They didn't get the information. Or it could be that they are maliciously trying to create division by saying black people are lashing out at the police. No matter what their perspective is, I think it is wrong for anyone to go along with this idea that this was a part of the protest or somehow was connected. This was terrorism by a very sick individual who took advantage of a horrible situation and took advantage of peaceful protesters and police doing their damn job and doing it well. And again, the heroism of those police, the bravery of those officers out there to defend life, to defend their own, it cannot be overlooked. So thank everybody for listening. I appreciate you watching. If you've got comments about anything I've said, feel free to leave it in the comment section. And let's keep speaking out about this issue of violence in America, because now this is escalating to a much more serious conversation about violence in America and how we prevent this quote-unquote civil war that the New York Post and other publications are trying to gin up and dramatize and lead us into. We're going towards a dangerous place. We need to back away from this cliff. We need to come together as people, as Americans, as blacks, whites, Asians, Latinos, gay, straight, illegal. We need to come together and say this cannot stand. We need strong statements from all of our politicians, our elected officials, and the people who are trying to run. And we need people to start proposing solutions. I'm tired of task forces that make recommendations that don't end up getting implemented. We need people to take real action, and so that's what we should be pushing people for. So again, thank you for listening. If you appreciated this perspective, feel free to let me know. If you think I'm full of it, feel free to let me know. But I'm going to get back to work. Take care, everybody. Be safe out there.